Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here, and of course 4Ks. And today we are talking about several Kino Lorber 4Ks and a few other things as well. A nice TV box set and one other sort of martial arts type film. And we will start with Blown Away. Now, this one is from 1994. It is from a director named Stephen Hopkins that I've certainly become more of a fan of over the years after sort of having taken him for granted a little bit when I was growing up in the 90s and seeing these movies a lot of times in the theaters. And he, I think, is most known for Predator 2 might be his big one. He also did Ghost in the Darkness. I'm a big fan of that one, and that's from 96. That's after this. And then Judgment Night, which is right before this. Huge fan of Judgment Night, and actually one of my favorites that he ever did. He's got a few more that are interesting. Under Suspicion with Gene Hackman is one I need to check out. Gene Hackman, Morgan Freeman. That's coming in a box set from Imprint Films that I have that I'm going to check out in a little bit here. But he also did Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, The Dream Child. So he's got quite the, quite the resume, if you will, of interesting films. My friend Patrick Bromley's a big fan of his, and he's helped me grow in my appreciation of him. Now, Blown Away is a story of sort of a mad bomber played by Tommy Lee Jones, and it's one of those that it is, a little bit like, let's see, so Speed comes out, I want to say Speed comes out the same year as this, and is it 94? Yeah, so it's interesting because it's two Mad Bomber movies. Like, basically, Tommy Lee Jones is like Dennis Hopper a bit in Speed, in that he has an agenda, and it's sort of a vengeance agenda. He is going after a specific person, sort of, or things relating to him, and that's Jimmy Dove, played by Jeff Bridges. He works for the bomb squad, and he is about to retire, but after that, his partner is killed in a bomb explosion, and Jeff Bridges, recognizes sort of the MO of the bomber and is like, this might be somebody I know, but it's part of a past that he has kind of kept under wraps for years. So it's kind of a tricky thing for him to reveal. But I do sort of love the setup of this one and, where it goes. And I think it's well played. I remember watching this as a kid in my dorm room in college on VHS with a group of people. And at that time, we were kind of laughing at the movie because it has a lot of moments where, Stephen Hopkins will sort of zoom in on something. I won't spoil anything, but like, it feels like something's going to blow up. And so everybody's kind of like, oh my God, and it became a little silly in that moment, but watching it this time, and it looks great on this 4K, I was kind of caught up in it. I was kind of hooked by the characterization, hooked by the, just the suspense of it. I think it's well put together. It builds to kind of a ridiculous climax, but it's earned enough. Susie Amos plays Jeff Bridges' wife, I believe. Lloyd Bridges is his dad, which is cool. His real dad playing or does he play I can't remember if I think he plays his dad, but he plays sort of a mentor type. Forrest Whitaker is the young gun bomb squad dude, and he's kind of like the hip new guy, and it seems like he's adversarial with Jeff Bridges, but they eventually sort of come together. Cuba Gooding Jr. is in here. Mike Starr is in here. I love Mike Starr from so many movies. And yeah, it really comes together in a way that I enjoy. So it's one that I feel like, even though it's been watched by a lot of people, it still seems a little bit underrated. And Stephen Hopkins is definitely underrated. So this is a brand new HDR master / Dolby Vision master from a 4K scan of 35 camera negative. Let's see here. Action-packed, tension-filled, edge-of-your-seat thriller that will hold you hostage for 120 electrifying minutes. So, yeah, great supporting cast, like I mentioned. And, yeah, nice build. Audio commentary by Stephen Hopkins, which is very cool to have. This has come out on Blu-ray before from Kino, but this is obviously an upgrade from that. Audio commentary by action film historians Mike Leader and Arnie Venema. The Making of Blown Away, A Day in the Life of the Bomb Squad, and Take Me Home music video. There is one note I should add that I was made aware of about the music. Apparently, I mean, there's definitely some U2 songs in here, but I think there was a greater soundtrack at large that was part of the original MGM DVD. And so some songs are rescored in the Blu-ray release, and that has not been corrected. To me, I saw the movie once on VHS in 1995. I don't remember the soundtrack. I've since seen it on Blu-ray, and so it didn't bother me per se, but it's something I like to make people aware of. It did bother this particular purchaser. They ended up returning the movie because they wanted the soundtrack intact, and I know that that's a difficult thing. I prefer that myself, but sometimes those things can't be solved, and you kind of take it or leave it scenario. So I still think the movie's worth watching despite that, and worth owning. So definitely a fun one, Blown Away. We have another 90s thriller here. This is Narrow Margin, and this one is from director Peter Hyams. This is from 1990. Hyams is a guy that I absolutely love. Another workman type like Stephen Hopkins, but I think is a little more well known because he did things like 2010, Time Cop, The Relic, End of Days, Outland. I'm a big Outland fan. Running Scared, Sudden Death with Jean-Claude, which is getting a 4K, I believe. Capricorn 1, Busting. That's maybe one of my favorite buddy cop movies out there, with Robert Blake and Elliot Gould. Just a fantastic 70s cop movie, and his debut. And I find him really interesting because he tends to shoot his own movies. He's his own DP, which is relatively rare in the industry. That doesn't happen a lot. Sometimes the director will do it, like Paul Thomas Anderson shoots Phantom Thread, but most of the time you want a DP to help you and collaborate with, and it's a big deal to take that on. So I always appreciate that he does do that. A really sharp guy, Hyams, too, by the way. Just when I've seen him interviewed and heard him speak, just clearly, just a very intelligent filmmaker. So anyway, I listened to some of the commentary of this, which includes, a commentary from him, and he was looking through, I think, the MGM catalog. I'm trying to think if MGM put this out, for older films that could be remade, and he came across the 1952 version of Narrow Margin, directed by Richard Fleischer, which is fantastic, by the way. I mean, one of the great noirs with Charles McGraw, Marie Windsor. It is just a really dynamic and only about 71 minutes long. I really love the original. I definitely do prefer it to this version, although I do find what he's doing with this version to be interesting. But yeah, the idea is that Gene Hackman plays an LA district attorney who's attempting to take an unwilling murder witness back to the United States from Canada, I believe, to testify against a high-level mob boss. And it becomes clear relatively quickly that there's some corruption within the district attorney's office because information keeps getting leaked, and so there's some bad folks that are finding out where this woman played by Ann Archer is, and they're wanting to get her. They're sending hitmen after her. One of them's played by James B. Sicking, who just passed away actually just recently, which is sad. An actor that I remember, I think from Doogie Howser, the dad from Doogie Howser maybe, but he's in tons of movies, just highly recognizable and great in this. This cast also includes J.T. Walsh in an early scene in the movie. Emmett Walsh is great as a cop. Harris Yulin as the mob boss, and definitely some other folks that I recognized. But always neat to see Gene Hackman in this period, and always needs to see a movie set on a train, which is what ends up being the way that Gene Hackman's trying to get Ann Archer back to Los Angeles. And it's a lot of people running and ducking around a train and trying not to get killed. So it's very enjoyable, and one that I hadn't seen for quite a long time, despite being aware of it and having seen it back in the 90s. It was nice to watch it again. Another one that looks nice on this 4K, and this disc includes commentary by cinematographer, screenwriter, director Peter Hyams. Yeah, he wrote the script as well. Audio commentary by film historian and critic Peter Tungat, and a making of featurette and selected sound bites and B-roll shots. So both of these have a 4K and a Blu-ray so far, the Blown Away and this. Yeah, really nice looking stuff and a nice throwback, and more 90s thrillers to come here. We've got this next one, which is by far one of the nuttiest of its type. It is another sort of thriller from the 90s. This is Turbulence, and it is from 1997, so a little later, and definitely way nuttier than I remember. I remember there's a sequel, Turbulence 3, with Craig Sheffer, I think, that is totally off the wall, out of its mind, crazy. But I'd always kind of remember the original Turbulence as being kind of a grounded thriller, no pun intended. And it is not, in that it is pretty crazy. It is directed by Robert Butler, who's a fascinating director that, did stuff going back to like the Disney movies of like The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes and Now You See Him, Now You Don't, and Hot Lead and Cold Feet and Barefoot Executive. So he did a bunch of Kurt Russell, family comedies, and then he would go on to do, this guy's worked a lot, but things like Up the Creek in '84, kind of a raunchy Animal House meets, Race for Your Life, Charlie Brown, like a crazy river rafting movie. It's really funny. And then, of course, Night of the Juggler in 1980, which is one of the great thrillers that's not found its way to, I don't even think, DVD. So I'm a big fan of Robert Butler, and this is from 97. And he just passed away last November. So he was, I want to say, let's see, he was born in 1927. He was old. He was like in his late 90s. And there's a commentary on this disc, and I was like, oh, why does he sound so old? Because he was very old. It's a nice commentary with Joe Begas, but he's clearly struggling a little bit because he is an older man at that point. And so anyway, the movie is ostensibly about a flight that is transporting some dangerous convicts, including Ray Liotta's character, Ryan Weaver, and he manages to break free and cause complete and total chaos on this flight. In fact, I never read any interviews with him about it, but it feels like he's almost channeling like Jack Nicholson in The Shining towards the end of that movie. Like, I feel like he even quotes him at some point. Maybe I'm wrong. but he's just nuts. And what's fascinating, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, so I do apologize, but I mean, you kind of know he's the villain of the movie, but the movie sets it up in this weird way where at the beginning he's kind of framed with like a teddy bear, and he keeps claiming like, I didn't kill anybody, and he's being extra nice to the stewardesses. So you're like, oh, maybe he's not a killer. Maybe he didn't do it. But again, spoiler, he did. He's totally crazy, and he ends up, causing havoc. Lauren Holly plays a flight attendant on this flight. Brendan Gleeson in a very not early, but because I think The General was the next year, but before I really knew who he was. He plays like a Southern criminal, which is funny to hear a guy with his accent struggling with a Southern accent, but he does okay with it. Hector Elizondo is he a cop? No, he's not on the flight. I feel like he's somewhere else. Or maybe he is on the flight. Jeffrey DeMunn from Walking Dead is in like the control tower trying to help her. Catherine Hicks from Star Trek 4 and other movies is one of the folks, one of the flight attendants. It's got a neat cast of folks that you totally recognize. But yeah, it becomes kind of a crazy, cat and mouse thriller on a plane with Lauren Holly trying to avoid Ray Liotta, who is very, I don't know, not only is he Jack Nicholson, but he's just like that very suave sort of serial killer type that's very seductive and sort of asks you questions and tries to get inside your head. And, it's a very effective Liotta performance, I gotta say, despite being kind of an outlandish film. But that said, yeah, pretty nuts. Also looks nice on 4K, and this is a 4K and a Blu-ray. Brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the original camera negative. Yeah, it didn't say on Narrow Margin what the scan is. I guess Studio Canal had done a scan too, so it looks good. But this is from the 4K from the OCN, so that's cool. Again, includes an audio commentary with Robert Butler, moderated by Begas, and theatrical trailer. But yeah, a movie that definitely has its fans, and I can see why. It's a little nutty for me in its way, but I want to watch it again. This was only maybe the second time I'd seen it since VHS, so I was totally in the dark trying to remember, what is this movie like? What is this about? And kind of seeing where it goes. It's a little nuts, but neat to see it get a nice 4K release. Then we have, also from the 90s, we have John Waters' film Crybaby. And Crybaby is, I think, he says in the commentary, yeah, it's from 1990 as well. He says it was technically, I think, his first studio movie. And I was like, oh, what about Hairspray, which he was coming off of? And I guess maybe that was like a negative pickup or something, because he was saying that this one really is kind of his first studio movie. And I will say, I love that there was a time when studios, would, like Universal, would give him a decent amount of money to make a movie like this, which is something along the lines of a juvenile delinquency movie / Elvis movie. I mean, it's very interesting in its way. And yeah, Johnny Depp obviously stars with Amy Locane, who this was her first movie. She's been in the news recently for on a very tragic drunk driving accident where she ended up killing somebody and went to jail and then got out of jail and then the first thing I've ever heard of was recalled back to jail and is now serving another 8 years, or she's in the midst of an 8-year sentence, which is all very sad. She was on Melrose Place, I think, as well. But anyway, this is her first movie. Susan Tyrrell is also in this. There's basically a rivalry of the what are they? I'm trying to think of the different gangs in this. This is another one, 4K scan from the original camera negative. Eisenhower is president, rock and roll is king, and Wade Crybaby Walker is the baddest hood in his high school. Screen idol Johnny Depp heads up a divine cast as the irresistible bad boy whose amazing ability to shed one single tear drives all the girls wild, especially Allison Vernon Williams, Amy Locane, a rich and beautiful square. Oh, yeah. There's the squares and the drapes. And it's kind of like the greasers, I guess, if you will, in terms of that. But so she's a square, he's a drape, West Side Story, all over again kind of stuff. Finds herself uncontrollably drawn to the dreamy juvenile and his forbidden world of rockabilly music, fast cars, and faster women. It's a hysterical, high-throttle world of 1954 in this outrageous musical comedy from the marvelous mind of John Waters, who, of course, did Pink Flamingos and Polyester and, I mean, so many now considered classic movies. Serial Mom, Female Trouble, which is my favorite of his. Cecil B. Demented. I'm just thinking of movies that don't have Blu-ray. Cecil B. Demented and Desperate Living and Pecker are all interesting. Just a fascinating cult filmmaker, and really him doing exactly his thing here with Crybaby. So again, great cast. Susan Tyrrell, one of the Drapes ladies. Iggy Pop is her husband or her dude. Ricky Lake, also a Drape. Tracy Lords, a Drape. And Polly Bergen is in this. Patty Hearst is in the movie as, I can't remember if she's Amy Locane's mom or one of her friends' moms, but this is obviously post the kidnappings, and she was doing some acting work, and she did a few different roles for John Waters, which is kind of interesting. Of course, Mink Stole, one of his regulars, and Willem Dafoe shows up for a short, prison scene. David Nelson from Ozzie and Harriet is in this. It's pretty nuts in terms of the cast, and it's musical. It's produced on a budget that clearly demonstrates it's a studio movie. And again, I can't believe that a studio let him make this, because it is just so him in terms of its influences, the 50s stuff and the musical stuff and the delinquent stuff, just that crazy off the wall John Waters vibe. So anyway, very nice transfer. And this has some nice features on it, including I think a newish commentary with Waters, because he's talking about Amy Locane's prison thing. So that is moderated by Brick Mansion Films producer Heather Buckley, who's really great in the commentary, just pulling out some other things from him, and really obviously a big fan of his. Bringing Up Baby featurette with John Waters, casting director Pat Moran, DP David Inslee, and actress Mink Stole. Pop Icons interview with actress Amy Locane. Part of a collection, actress Tracy Lords interview. A Few Yucks, actor and rock legend Iggy Pop interview. All These Misfits, actress Ricky Lake interviewed. Patty Hearst interviewed, So Tired of Being Good. In the Sandbox, actor Darren E. Burroughs interviewed. Hip to Be Square, actor Stephen Mailer. Talking Hair, Barbara Howard and Barbara Howard Hep Preston. And it came from Baltimore, a 2005 documentary with the cast and crew, plus 5 deleted scenes. So a really nice and good-looking, 4K release of this cult classic. I love that he's getting so much love on Blu-ray and 4K. That makes me very happy. And another cult director to follow that, we have Abel Ferrara's film Bad Lieutenant, not The. 1992, same year as Reservoir Dogs, which I find fascinating. Definitely part of a Harvey Keitel-essence, if you will, an actor who was very prominent in the 70s and into the 80s, but I feel like had this big resurgence with Reservoir Dogs and then this film and then Pulp Fiction, and just really kind of took off again. And this one's a pretty intense, pretty dark movie from the great Abel Ferrara, who, of course, made things like King of New York, Miss 45, Driller Killer. He did Body Snatchers, Fear City, China Girl. The Addiction, a really good one. The Funeral. He's a great filmmaker with a lot of fans and a lot of films that people love. And so this is a big one, because this also a brand new HDR Dolby Vision Master from a 4K scan of the 35 camera negative. He has survived the streets for 20 years. He's a gambler, a thief, a junkie, a killer, and a cop. Now he's investigating the most shocking case of his life as he moves closer to the truth. His self-destructive past is closing in. New York City auteur, provocateur, Abel Ferrara, and co-writer Zoe Lund. She is Miss 45, and I guess co-wrote this movie, which is very cool. Gaze unflinchingly into the life of a bad lieutenant, starring screen legend Harvey Keitel at his most brilliant and brutal in what is perhaps the most incendiary and notorious film of the 1990s. Stellar supporting cast, including Victor Argo and Paul Calderone. Now, this is the NC-17 cut of the film. There's some pretty crazy stuff in here. Some nudity and some other things happening. I won't get into it specifically, but it is NC-17 for a reason, for sure. So you have the 96-minute cut of the film here. And yeah, it is it is something if you haven't seen it. And I hadn't for quite a while, so it is definitely a revelation in a lot of ways. But this also has a Blu-ray, of course. Audio commentary by director Abel Ferrara and cinematographer Ken Kelsch. It all happens here. Abel Ferrara and Making of Bad Lieutenant documentary, very cool. Bad Neighborhoods, Locations of Bad Lieutenant featurette, and Ken and Abel interview with cinematographer Ken Kelsch, who I don't know his work that well, but obviously I admire what he's doing here. But yeah, neat to see this finally get a really nice 4K release with some nice extras. And then I've just got a couple more things. This is just a Blu-ray here of The Perfect Weapon, starring Jeff Speakman, martial artist Jeff Speakman, who, when I was in high school in the 90s, working at a video store, some of the stuff that I liked was martial arts stuff, so I was getting into Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris, and then I started getting into Steven Seagal and basically anybody that was putting together a martial arts action movie. I was into it. So The Perfect Weapon comes out in 1991, starring Jeff Speakman, who I didn't know, and I was like, oh heck yeah, I want to see that. And he's very good as a martial artist. As an actor, a little stiff, but he definitely can tear things up on the dance floor, as I like to say, in terms of the way that he can beat the crap out of people. It's a very basic plot, sort of revenge for a fallen master kind of thing. James Hong also stars in this. He's very good. It has Mako and Professor Tura Tanaka as well. So it's got some fun stuff, some arch villains, and like I said, very basic in its plot. You're not probably watching this for plot, but if you are, it's not going to do a lot for you. But in terms of the martial arts scenes, it definitely holds up. A lot of great fights and plenty of moments where people underestimate Jeff Speakman, which is one of those things I love in a martial arts movie, when you're like, oh boy, these guys are going to get it, and they don't even know it. And then they do, and that's what you want. So I remember this movie, and I was like, what else did Jeff Speakman do? And I remember I sort of had to look up. There's a movie called The Expert from 1995, which is another one I remember watching. And then Street Night from 1993, from a couple years later. That one I remember a bit less. But those were two, especially The Expert, where I was like, oh, there's the new Jeff Speakman movie. I totally need to see that because I enjoyed The Perfect Weapon. So anyway, this has been out before, but this new version is a brand new HD master from a 4K scan of the 35 camera negative, and now includes an audio commentary by director Mark DeSalle and action film historian Mike Leader, as well as something called Street Speed, which is an actual interview with Jeff Speakman. So that was very cool to have that, as well as deleted and extended scenes. So if you have the old Blu-ray, which I did, very bare bones, and this is much better. Both in terms of the scan, which I didn't do an A/B comparison to, but the extras really make it worth picking up if you're a martial arts fan. And then lastly, we have, picking up from their previous wonderful release of the Columbo 70s stuff, we have Columbo the Return. And this is from 1989 to 2003, right? And it is many discs here. It's 2,233 minutes. And we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 discs in the first set. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 discs. 6 discs in the second set, I believe. So a lot of discs and a lot of material to cover here. And what I do love that they do with these, and I love Columbo. I've definitely come to love Columbo more since Poker Face. I'll be honest. Like, I was a fan, but I didn't watch as much as I would have liked to, knowing later how much I like the show. And because of the cast, the guest stars. That's really, for me. I mean, Falk, obviously, it's one of those roles where you're like, oh, this guy's clearly meant to play this character. And this idea of a cop who's always kind of, you know, getting in the business of the criminals and letting them think he's stupid, but then sort of coming back and being like, you know, wait a minute, actually, I just one more thing, you know, the just sort of one more thing of it has become highly entertaining for me and allowed me to spot that sort of a detective in other, like I was watching Dial M for Murder the other day and I was like, oh man, this, I think it's John Williams, the actor, is the detective, and he's very Columbo, obviously before Columbo, but sort of the like, you know, I was thinking about, you know, that sort of thing. And I love that, you know, when the crooks think they've gotten away with it and they haven't. But so they have this little episode guide, which I'm going to go through here. So this is season 8, 9, 10. And we have some incredible guest stars here. So starting in February 1989 with Columbo Goes to the Guillotine, directed by Leo Penn, father of Sean Penn, who directed Star Trek and other stuff. So this one has cast that includes Anthony Andrews, Karen Austin, James Green, and Anthony Zerbe. Big fan of that. There's much more than meets the eye when Columbo investigates the death of a magician who supposedly was killed by one of his own clever magic tricks. Murder, Smoke, and Shadows, also from February 1989. Guest stars Fisher Stevens and Molly Hagan. Directed by James Frawley, who did the Muppet movie. Columbo searches for clues on the cutting room floor when he suspects a high-powered film director of hiding evidence of murder. By the way, these are all remastered in 4K and look fantastic, each one of these episodes. Sex and the Married Detective from April 89. Let's see here. Also directed by Frawley. Does the heart rule the head or vice versa? Columbo ponders the answer to the timeless question and others when he must outwit a sex therapist involved in a crime of passion. Grand Deceptions from May of 89. Directed by Sam Wanamaker, who's represented in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as the director of the TV show in that movie. So that's kind of cool. This is obviously, he was directing TV around this time. Robert Foxworth as the special guest star. Rank and reputation proved to be particularly difficult obstacles when Columbo looks into the murder of a respected military general by one of his overly ambitious colonels. Then we have, let's see here, Murder, a Self-Portrait. This is now season 9. Again, James Frawley. I had no idea James Frawley had done so many of these. It's No Murder by Numbers when Columbo investigates the deadly relationships between a savvy artist, his troubled ex-wife, his attention-starved current wife, and his live-in model. And then we had Columbo Cries Wolf. Guest stars Ian Buchanan. David Huddleston is in this one. That's great. Deirdre Hall. Directed by Daryl Duke, who I love from Payday and The Silent Partner. Very cool directors they're using here. When a woman with controlling interest in a magazine disappears before meeting to discuss selling her majority share, Columbo is ready to throw the book at her partner. Agent for Murder from February 1990. Patrick McGoohan is the big guest star in that one. And he directed as well, which is really cool. It's not an open and shut case when a man with strong political connections and a strong motive for murder was the last person to see a supposed suicide victim alive. I really want to see that one, especially because I just got the Prisoner set from Imprint, and so I love the idea of McGoohan starring and directing. Rest in Peace, Mrs. Columbo from March 1990. Guest stars Helen Shaver, Ian McShane, Roscoe Lee Brown. Directed by Vincent McKeevity, who's speaking of Robert Butler before, McKeevity was a big Disney director that also turned to TV. Columbo's case is personal and deadly serious when the wife of a man he helped put in prison is on a quest for revenge. Uneasy Lies the Crown from April 1990. James Reed, Joe Anderson, Nancy Walker, Dick Sargent. Written by Stephen Bochco. It's time to get to the root of the problem when Columbo investigates a jealous dentist, his wealthy wife, and her movie star lover. Murder in Malibu from May 1990. Andrew Stevens, Brenda Vaccaro, Janet Margolin. Columbo must read between the lines when he looks into the killing of a wealthy romance novelist who was found dead in an unusual state of distress. Season 10, Columbo Goes to College. Stephen McCaffrey, Gary Hertzberger, James Suderis, and Robert Culp. E.W. Swackhammer directed this, a very great TV movie director. Columbo enters the hallowed halls of higher education after the murder of a professor and discovers that some seemingly helpful students aren't making the grade. Caution, murder can be hazardous to your health from February 91. Guest stars George Hamilton. Directed by Daryl Duke, again. When a shady TV crime host gets rid of his main rival for the gig, it's up to Columbo to uncover his sinister secret the star wants permanently off camera. Columbo and the Murder of a Rock Star from April of 91. Let's see. Shara Janice, Cheryl Paris, Julian Stone, Sandra Curry, Little Richard, and Dabney Coleman. Columbo meets his match in the form of a winning defense lawyer, I think that's Coleman, accused of murdering his rock star girlfriend and pinning the crime on her hapless secret lover. I'm just guessing that's Coleman. But death hits the jackpot. Stars Rip Torn. Very great. Money makes for murder most foul when Columbo investigates a photographer who hid the fact he won a large lottery and he didn't want to share it with his strange wife. No Time to Die from February 92. Donald Moffat in this one. Columbo exchanges his trench coat for formal wear to attend a family wedding, but he soon finds himself back on the job when the bride disappears before a couple leaves on their honeymoon. 92 November, Bird in the Hand. This one has Tyne Daly, Greg Evigan, Frank McRae. I love Frank McRae, and Steve Forrest. Wealthy man is killed, and it appears that a hit-and-run driver was the cause, but Columbo's investigation takes an explosive turn when a bomb hidden in the car detonates. It's All in the Game from October 93, stars Faye Dunaway as the big... and this one's written by Peter Falk. Very cool. When a two-timing gigolo is murdered, Columbo's main suspect is the dead man's seductive girlfriend who has a one-track mind and a strong alibi. Butterfly in Shades of Grey from January 94. Shatner is back on Columbo. One of my favorite Columbo episodes from the last one. Directed by Dennis Dugan, who would go on to do Adam Sandler movies. Very cool. When a staff member of a radio show is murdered, Columbo suspects that the radio talk show host is willing to kill to stop his daughter from moving to New York. Undercover from May 94. This one has Ed Begley Jr., Burt Young, and Tyne Daly again. And A Curious Double Murder is only the beginning of a race to solve the mystery of an unsolved bank heist. Columbo goes undercover to gather missing pieces of only clue, a photograph. Strange Bedfellows from May 95. George Wendt stars in this one, and Rod Steiger. Vincent McKeevity directing a lot of these. A corrupt horse breeder finds himself facing trouble with both Columbo and a mob boss when he frames a murder and murders a bookie. A Trace of Murder, May 97. David Rashke from Sledgehammer is the star of this one, as well as Barry Corbin, who's great. I like Barry Corbin a lot. It's a simple case of millionaire murdering the businessman suing him, or so the crime scene investigator wants everyone to believe. It's up to Columbo to settle the whole affair. And then October 98, again, McGowan returns and directs, with Rue McClanahan also starring, and Sally Kellerman. Columbo investigates the disappearance of a Hollywood gossip journalist whose last expose was on a mortician to the stars. March 12th, 2001. So these are like big specials, basically. that are coming, once a year at this point. Billy Connolly in this one. McGowan also directs, but not stars. Columbo is led through the musical world of movies by a Hollywood composer who conducts The Perfect Murder. And lastly, from January 2003, Columbo likes the nightlife. Matthew Rice, Jennifer Skye, Douglas Roberts. In his last TV appearance, Columbo gets a taste of Los Angeles rave scene as he investigates the suspicious suicide of a tabloid reporter. So he's getting a little older, a little long in the tooth towards the end here, but still very cool that all these are together in one set, and it is right up there with the previous set in terms of the quality and in terms of the guest stars, and so it is a high recommend. I love the Kino's continuing to do this kind of television. Just really great stuff. So anyway, that will do it for this round. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.